Hello, Packers fans. Welcome into PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined by Pete Dougherty here on this Friday. It's a great day in Green Bay, Pete. I couldn't figure out what I was trying to say there. Beautiful weather, perfect temperatures. Couldn't ask for a better day to get ready for football. The trucks are already all in the parking lot. This is only the second home game they've had this year. It feels like we've been deep into the season already. But welcoming a Patriots team that is still the New England Patriots in name, and in Bill Belichick, but it feels like that's about the only way they're still the New England Patriots, Pete.
Yeah, they'll even with lesser talent, he's such a good coach, especially defensively, that they're always going to be tough. They do multiple things. He's really big on they're a different looking defense week to week based on who they're playing, and his game plans can vary widely. So he's going to be tough that way. But, I mean, it sounds like Mac Jones isn't playing. If he plays, which I guess he hasn't ruled it out, he's going to be really hobbled. Packers their defense is on the upswing. It's just kind of hard to see it's hard not to pick the Packers, but you never know in this league.
And Mac Jones keeps saying that he's going to play, but he's saying that he's going to play while not practicing.
Yeah.
And I think today he actually did show up to practice, but he stayed behind the quarterback nets. He stayed behind the quarterback net the whole time. He had both ankles taped, and he didn't practice yesterday at all. So, I mean, is it almost just kind of like, I feel like he's just wishing and hoping, and there's not really any chance of him actually playing?
I would suspect that's the case. Now, I was talking yesterday in the locker room with another reporter who's been around even longer than I have.
Unheard of.
I know, just about. And we were reminiscing about 1995 when Favre suffered a pretty severe ankle sprain in Minnesota. It's about halfway through the year, somewhere in there. And they didn't think he was going to play the next week at home against the Bears. He didn't practice all week. He didn't even show up at the facility all week. They had a trainer live with him, basically, and work on his ankle almost 24/7. If the guy was awake, they were doing some kind of therapy on him or whatever. Favre goes out, he plays, and he throws 5 touchdown passes. They blew out the Bears. But I don't think Mac Jones is quite Brett Favre either. So, yeah, I think what you said is right. It's probably I don't know this, but yeah, it's probably wishful thinking. He's trying to let his teammates know he's doing everything possible. I would guess they'll hold him out.
I mean, a severe high ankle sprain, those usually take weeks to recover from.
Yeah, and even if even if the original report overestimated the severity, any high ankle sprain, those are bad. Those it's pretty tough to play a week after one of those.
Especially when you're a quarterback. I mean, you can't. I mean, for anyone, but you can't plant your foot. You can't. Yeah. Mike Jones likes to scramble. Can't do hardly any of that with an ankle sprain like that. But that being said, Pete, is Brian Hoyer the better answer here? Would you rather have a hobbled Mac Jones or a backup Brian Hoyer?
I would guess you'd rather have Hoyer out there. I've still got to look some things up on him, but he was a decent quarterback. Like for Cleveland, he did okay when he was their starter. He's probably one of the better, backups in the league. So, he gives them, I think, at least a fighting chance. It's not one of these guys that half the teams in the league have a backup where they have almost no chance of winning. So this guy at least gives them, a fighting chance going against Aaron Rodgers.
We've got a couple of questions coming in. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments as well. We're going to get to a couple here, starting with Daniels. What's the story with Jair? Now, Pete, Jair was at practice today. In fact, we have some footage of him at practice today. That's a little bit louder than I thought it was. Seeing him there with Matt LaFleur, he took part in stretch, but not the jog. During the jog through, he worked with that resistance band, but then he did go out to the field with the team, and that is not what he did yesterday. So, I mean, he's had a groin injury before, so I imagine a little bit of precautionary here, but considering where this Patriots offense is at, do they need him this week, or could they let him rest, especially having seen what they were able to do with Keyshawn Nixon and Rasul Douglas last week?
Yeah, he had his helmet there, so that suggests he was going to be doing something out there on the field.
Right.
My natural inclination was to think if he was hurt bad enough where they couldn't put him back in the game last week, he's probably not playing this week.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe he feels, really good. And I would still think that kind of what you're suggesting there would be the way to go, to give him another week off, especially, they're going to London the next week. Give him,
and then they play the Jets.
Off. Yeah.
And then Washington.
Yeah. So, right. I mean, they're not exactly facing murderer's row here, are they?
Right.
So my guess would be, they would err on the side of caution with such an important player, but maybe he feels really good. Maybe he'll play. I guess if I were to bet, I would bet against it, but your guess is as good as mine. I mean, I would have guessed that, Bakhtiari wasn't going to play, the week he came back, and he obviously did.
On Wednesday, I asked Jair in the locker room, I said, "Are you talking?" He said, "I'm not talking today, just vibing." And I was like, that sounds about right. Yesterday, he didn't talk either, but he did come in right as we were leaving, and I kind of stopped him for a second. I was like, "How are you feeling?" And he's like, "I feel okay." And he's like, "I'm getting there." So I think he understands that since he has had this injury before, and given the schedule that they've got, he can take it easy right now. As to whether that'll happen remains to be seen. Speaking of David Bakhtiari, and we've got some questions here from Randy. Actually, this is a few people, but let's talk about Bakhtiari first. He didn't practice Wednesday. No. Yes. Didn't practice Wednesday. Practiced yesterday. Was out there during stretch today. Our colleague Tom Silverstein, who's over here on the other side of the office from me right now, I asked Matt LaFleur today if Bakhtiari has a say in that choice. Like, Matt LaFleur has told us he basically is never going to practice 3 days in the week again. But, which days does he practice? And the fact that they switched up which days they're in pads this week. They did a walkthrough on Wednesday. They were in shoulder pads Thursday. And so he asked him, how much does Bakhtiari have a say in that? And he said, we take that into account. But it's just kind of day to day, week to week. It's like the wind, is what he told Spoon. All of that to say, you said last week the fact that he practiced 2 days in a row made you think he would play versus the Bucs. He's practiced 2 days in a row now again this week. Does it feel like he's on track to play and maybe even play more and not do as much of the rotation against the Packers? Yeah,
it sure does look like he's going to play. I don't know what they'll do with the rotation, how slow or fast they'll go with that. Will they ramp up from half to, 2 out of every 3 and then full time, or will they just go from half to full time? Will they want to do a couple games half and then jump to full time? I just don't know how they're gonna handle that. But yeah, it sure looks like he's gonna play. It'd be kind of a stunner at this point if he didn't.
And I'm trying to think kind of along the same vein, looking at who they have coming up. You have Matthew Judon this week. That's a tough battle. I'm trying to think of who the Giants would have coming off the edge.
They've got they drafted Thibodeau, right?
That's right. And he played in his first game this past week. Yeah. That is right. And then let's see, versus the Jets. I mean, you've got Williams, but that's more interior.
Right.
I'm just wondering how long they can get by with this rotation with Bakhtiari. Chase Young is still out for Washington, right?
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I wonder if with this particular player comeback, I wonder if the opponent really doesn't matter so much as just, they'll handle it whatever is best to get him up to full speed without getting hurt, to get him to full time without aggravating the knee too much. I would think that would matter a lot more than who they're going against. I would think. Now, you never know what goes through these guys' minds, but that would be my best guess is they've got some kind of plan which they'll be ready to adjust from as far as how they want to ramp him up.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't think opponent would matter all that much.
Randy asks, any update on Watson, Big Dog Lewis, Big Bob Tunyon, and Lizard King Lazard? We've got all the nicknames in there. Poor Watson doesn't have a nickname yet. I guess Rogers hasn't given him one yet. Christian Watson was a full participant yesterday, which is encouraging. Of course, he'll get his game status today as, questionable, doubtful, whatever. But the fact that he was a full participant yesterday, coming off that hamstring that kept him out of the Bucs game, I mean, is that encouraging, Pete, just to kind of see him go on a day that included pads?
I would think. I mean, with an injury like that, they don't, they're not experimenting around too much, I don't think. So that must be a sign that they feel like he's ready to go. And unless he aggravated it during practice, then I would have to think the chances are really good he's going to play this week. That would be my best guess.
Lewis, I'm not actually sure. Randy, I apologize. I'll have to go back.
Was that just a Veterans Day rest?
No, he has a groin injury.
Okay.
And then Tunyon, actually, our Ryan Wood talked to Tunyon this week about just kind of his status, his recovery, how he's feeling. That's a great story. You can go check out on PackersNews.com. He spent a long time talking to Tunyon this week. And then Lazard has been a limited participant in practice, but he has been participating some. He was out there again today, so we'll have to kind of see what his game status is. But, I asked Matt LaFleur about that today. I said, is that pain management that's still lingering from the ankle, or is that precautionary so as not to have a setback? And he said it's just, kind of like taking it day by day, of course, again. But he made the comment, he said, Lazard is such a gritty guy that, he can get out there and tough it out in a game. We haven't seen him get a lot of targets in the games, Pete, but he's made the most of the ones he's gotten. I think he's had 4 receptions and 2 touchdowns in those 4. And actually, he's had more than that now because he had that big third down conversion at the end of the Bucs game too.
Yeah. Yeah. And that showed, we talked about this on Sunday after the game, those are, I think, the kind of throws that he's going to get a lot of this year. Clutch situations, third and anywhere from, 4 to 10 yards, 4 to 12 yards. That's probably a guy, and in the red zone, that's probably a guy that Rodgers really trusts and will be looking to, and that they'll be calling plays for in those kind of situations.
So we've got a couple more questions coming in. I'm going to come back to a couple I'm skipping, but I wanted to go ahead and grab this one. How does it work with short-term IR? Can Watkins practice when able? Pete, I haven't seen Sammy Watkins on the practice field, but he's in the building because he's been in the locker room every day. And I believe now the limit is 4 weeks, and so he's a week in.
Yeah.
So he's got 1 week under his belt. Can he practice from your knowledge?
No. If you're on IR, you can't practice. So he will miss the 4 weeks, and then as soon as at the start of the 5th week, he doesn't have to come back, but he's eligible to come back. But then he has to take up a roster spot, and then he can practice. But you have to be taking up a roster spot to practice.
Okay. Yeah, and when they did put Sammy on IR, they used that roster spot to sign Patrick Taylor to the active roster to get a third running back. So we'll kind of see how they adjust that when he gets ready to come back. Okay, let's hop back and grab a couple more questions here. Rebecca asks, will Belichick try and keep Packers from running and dare Rodgers to throw it? Pete, before you answer this question, we have someone else who has an opinion on this matter. Because I asked Aaron Rodgers this week about, dealing with Matthew Judon and the challenge he presents, because that's the position and the player that will determine a lot of times on each play, especially if they're running an RPO, whether it's a pass or a run. He's going to be watching what Judon does to determine what he does, to determine what play gets ran. So let's hear from what Rodgers had to say this week.
You can prepare for a lot of things, but everything could change in the game or before the game or halftime, third quarter, fourth quarter. They have a lot of scheme they can get to. They're very well prepared, very well coached, and you got to be kind of ready for every coverage, pressure, zero, drop 8, a lot of different things. A lot of respect for Coach Belichick. He's the best coach in the history of the game, I think. He's a great player. He's got 3 sacks, and 91's got 4, so they got a good pass rush. Plus, they give you a ton of different looks, with empty pressures and adjustments and checks of their own, delayed blitzes, spying, a lot of different things they can do. So we got to be aware of where he's at because he's a game record. I'm not going to give him any ideas. I'm sure he'll look at what he thinks we do best and try and take away first and second options, and then have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D. I'm sure he hopes he doesn't get to, but I'm sure they'll have a great plan for us.
Pete, what he was saying right there at the very end, I think is really interesting and kind of goes back to Rebecca's question here about, Belichick is sort of a mastermind at figuring out the one thing you want to do the most and taking that away. And right now, does it sort of work in the Packers' favor that there is no Devontae Adams, and that of course on paper Aaron Jones is the person they want to go to the most, but some weeks it's been Aaron Jones, some weeks it's been Romeo Doubs, some weeks they played the Vikings and they couldn't get it to anybody. So I mean, does it sort of work in their favor that there's not one guy right now?
It's funny, when I was looking, because I can see the questions here too on the side of the screen, and when I saw that question, the first thing I thought of was what Rodgers said there, because I watched the video of the interview, and that was the first thing I thought of, because you can count on Belichick to try to take away, as you said, whatever you do best. And so I think she's right on the money, because I think Rebecca's right on the money, because the Packers want to run the ball. Mm-hmm. And so I would think that's the first thing you'd want to, and how strange, right? You go to a game and you're forcing Aaron Rodgers to throw.
We think, here's our game plan: force the 4-time MVP to throw it on us.
I think that's a winning
against our secondary that doesn't include J.C. Jackson anymore. That's going to win us the game.
I mean, seriously, but that's kind of what you're looking at, Mm-hmm. And it's not obviously because of Rodgers, but it's because of how young his receiving core is. But that shows you the dilemma that teams will run into if the passing game keeps maturing and evolving over the next 3 months, and those rookies come along. This could be a much better offense by December, January than it is now. And there's a lot has to happen between now and then. I'm not saying it's definitely going to happen, but I kind of think they're going to do what they can to keep the Packers from running the ball and live with making those young receivers beat them.
I heard a stat yesterday, Pete, that the Packers receivers currently lead the league in yards after catch. And a lot of that has to do with the RPOs, the short passing game, the jet sweeps, the shovel passes to Dobbs and Watson and Jones. But that's what's working right now. And so, I mean, you just keep riding that as long as you can, right?
Yeah. There were years when McCarthy was coach where they were way up there in yards after catch too. But like Cobb had a lot of yards after the catch the other day. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that and all those screen passes, all those things. So those numbers probably will be higher than normal this year.
I know we're getting ready to head to the locker room here, but a good question from Levi that snuck in. Would they think about calling Kevin King if the Jair issues linger? I can tell you, as someone who still follows him on Twitter, that the only thing Kevin King is doing during Packers games is tweeting about the Packers games. So he's tuned in. I mean, is that an option? Is it worth it?
Yeah, and you notice he's got the LOL there too. So I think he probably has zero desire for King to come back. You never know what might happen later in the season. If they have injury problems or whatever, this is a guy who would know the system and all that. It seems weird he's not signed. I haven't asked around about why he's not with a team. Kind of my gut feel is he probably doesn't want to play for the minimum, and nobody wants to pay him more than the minimum. So, and he's made a lot of money, so he's just going to wait it out and wait till a team has injury problems and then try to leverage that for better than minimum contract. Mm-hmm. But I would think they'll avoid bringing him back unless maybe if they really get hit by injuries or something. But I think the LOL part on that Levi was was saying was probably more the more accurate. A lot of times when they move on from a guy, they're basically done with him.
And I would be interested in seeing them, this combination, in more than one game. But I think they might have something by keeping Rasul outside and playing Keyshawn Nixon in the slot when they go to nickel.
Yeah, Douglas is better built for the outside for sure. He's not your prototypical small, quick guy that you'd put in the slot. Now, when Alexander's playing, it looks like they don't want to put him in the slot because he does have to do more tackling, and I'm guessing they don't want him getting all beaten up. And he's probably better on outside than inside, but he's built like an inside guy. But maybe this will change their thinking, or maybe they'll occasionally flip-flop those guys. They're both veterans, so it shouldn't be that hard to do. It's not like they're rookies, I think they know all the assignments. And maybe by the end of the year, they're splitting those guys depending on game plan and opponent and all that on who's on the inside. But we thought that going into the season, and they've shown no sign that when all those guys are healthy that anybody but Douglas is going to play slot. So we'll see.
Douglas campaigned all offseason to be the slot because he's physical. Like he's really, really good on the outside. He's probably better on the outside, but he's really physical. He's gotten several, tackles for loss from that slot position. So I understand wanting him there. But I think it finally caught up to him, the difference playing in the slot versus outside. Because I asked him yesterday, do you want to stay outside while Jair is recovering? And he said, yeah, I get more snaps there. He said, if I'm outside, I get 100% of the snaps. If I'm inside, I get like 25 snaps. I'm like, you didn't think about this before you campaigned all off season to play.
Well, he's exaggerating with you too, because they're in nickel or dime, probably 80% of their snaps. So he's exaggerating a little bit, but yeah, it would be 100% of the snaps if he's on the outside. But you're right, because he is a big guy. And he is a good physical tackler, which helps in the run game. So there's a lot of issues to consider on who you want to play where. And I still think they need to be more flexible than they've been so far. As far as obviously the Jefferson thing, I think every week that goes by, that game plan looks worse and worse. And also, they talked about mixing and matching who plays the slot, but they have done none of it. I mean, it was Douglas until Alexander was hurt, basically. So I still think they should have the flexibility to put Alexander in there more for specific teams. And with the experienced secondary they have, I just have trouble seeing why it would be a big issue assignment-wise. I mean, those guys are all longtime veterans. They know the defense. I would think that they should be able to do that.
I said that was our last question. We are going to throw one more in here because we've spent a lot of time talking about offense today. So let's wrap up this defensive conversation. Levi asked, are the edge rushers outside of Smith and Gary showing enough?
No. No, Levi, they're not. I mean, Enigbare is really young, so, I'll be curious to see if his playing time, if he starts getting to the quarterback a little bit. But those, Garvin is who he is. He's fairly stout at the point, but even there was a play or two where he got trapped inside on outside runs. That's why I get, like I did chat this week, and a lot of people were asking about, do they need to go sign or trade for a receiver, which would cost money, presumably be somebody who makes at least a decent salary. And I think they need to wait. One, because, these guys, this receiving corps could keep improving and they might not need it. And two, what if they might want a rusher at midseason no matter what, but what if something happens to Smith or Gary? They will be desperate for an outside rusher, and they'll need whatever money they have in cap room to bring in somebody who could shore that up if they lose one of those two guys for a long time or to, a season-ending injury. So that would be, if I'm the Packers, that's my greatest position of concern for if injuries hit.
We asked about bringing Kevin King back. They could sign Whitney Merciless back. Playoffs. So we never know. Whatever happens, we will be there to cover it for you all. As I said, we're getting ready to head down to the locker room, so I'm going to say goodbye, and then we will have full coverage for you this afternoon from Packers Friday practice and leading up to the Packers versus the Patriots on Sunday. Make sure to follow Tom Silverstein's live blog during the game, and then, Pete, you have a column coming this weekend, right? Keeping ready?
I do. I think it might be posted online already, and then as far as the actual print product, it'll run Sunday, but it's about Elgton Jenkins and the prospects for his upcoming contract negotiations, which I'm guessing will commence sometime during the season. The talks will start.
I saw this sneak in right here at the end. Clay's still available. Clay Matthews did say he wants to retire, but he wanted to retire as a Packer. Maybe they bring him back. Usually they sign him back for like a 1-day contract so they can retire with the team they want to. What if they sign Clay Matthews back for like 3 weeks and they're like, you can retire as a Packer, but you got to play these 3 weeks? I don't. He hasn't played in a while.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. He was a one-time fantastic player, but Father Time, undefeated, right?
He was great in Pitch Perfect too. So, okay, as I said, we're going to head off. Stay tuned to PackersNews.com for full coverage as the Packers get ready to welcome the Patriots on Sunday. Thanks so much, guys.